station. This is James Corden with the CBS Late Late Show. How do you hear me?
James, welcome aboard the International Space Station. We heard you loud and clear.
Oh, it's so lovely to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. How are you getting on up there? How are you doing? Are you okay?
We're doing pretty good. We've been here, I guess, just about a month now, right? And I think we're assimilating into the ISS life, trying to help Chris out as much as we can. And actually, in just a few days, we're going to be performing some spacewalks to replace some batteries on board the outside of the space station.
Wow, I mean, I don't even like it if I have to replace batteries in the remote, let alone going out to do a spacewalk. Now, I want to ask you about your flight. Because you were the first humans to fly the SpaceX shuttle. You've both had missions to space before. Were you more nervous taking off this time in a brand new spacecraft than you were previously in a regular shuttle?
No, definitely not. We spent the better part of 5 years working on this vehicle with SpaceX, and especially the last two where we lived out in California more than we were at home in Houston. And I think we got to know the vehicle pretty well. We got to know the folks out at SpaceX very well and work through all the challenges that we had developing the vehicle. And I think we were very comfortable by the time it was ready for us to fly. We also had a couple of flights prior to that. We had an uncrewed test mission that they flew to the space station about a year prior, and then they flew an in-flight abort test just a few months ago before our flight. So all in all, I don't think nervous. I think we were pretty excited, and we were glad to be at that point since it had been a pretty long 5-year road to get there.
Now, you described the good catch, Bob. Now, you described the SpaceX craft as being sort of like you're in a giant iPad. Does that not scare you more? I feel if I was going to space, I'd want definite buttons and levers rather than the prospect of accidentally deleting something with my elbow. Is it not more scary with touch screens everywhere?
That's a really good question. We get asked quite a bit, James, about what it's like to fly a space iPad. And from both of our experiences, they did a really good job. We spent years working on these displays to make sure you can't have things like your email and different applications on there that you could accidentally delete. It pretty much runs one program, and that one program is flying the SpaceX spacecraft. And we do, folks talk a lot about the iPad aspect of things, but we do have a series of buttons that allow us to do some things like separate the capsule if the rocket was performing badly when we were headed uphill. And it also allows us to do things like deploy the parachutes manually if we needed to get the chutes out coming home, just in case there was a problem. So we do have a handful of buttons. It's not all just iPads, but even with that, we took a lot of care to make sure nothing extraneous was on those iPads or those touchscreens that could cause us a problem.
Well, that's great. Now, I'm jealous of both of you right now because I've spent most of my life wanting to be weightless. And you are now in the zero G. Tell me, what's the best and worst thing about living life in zero gravity every day?
Doug and I talked quite a bit about that, knowing some of the things that people might ask us about. And living in zero gravity, the probably the most frustrating thing is one of the things you really take for granted is that if you put something down, at least if nobody moves it, it will be there when you get back. Here in space, you got to go through some extra efforts to make sure things stay where you put them. As you can see, we've got a trimmer on a little cord, a little leash, so it doesn't get away from us. And you can imagine that there's a lot of places where, like going to the restroom, for example, where you like stuff to stay where you put it. And so we definitely find that frustrating at times.
And what have you got here, Doug? Is this just a little snack? Oh, look at this. That's magnificent. Oh, I find that the entire thing is mind-blowing to me. Now, can we talk about your return to Earth for a moment? How are you going to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere when you come back?
Well, it's a similar process for all space vehicles. You are at a speed right now of about 17,500 miles an hour, and you have to slow down to less than 30 miles an hour before we splash down in the water. So it's a combination of entering the Earth's atmosphere with a heat shield that protects us from the buildup of heat as we go through the Earth's plasma as we re-enter. And as we re-enter, we also slow down significantly. Then we'll slow down a little bit more once our drogue chutes come out. So we have a series of parachutes that'll come out to slow us down. So there's 2 drogue chutes that'll come out first, and then we'll have 4 main parachutes. And then ideally we'll splash down somewhere off the east coast of Florida is our prime landing site. A little over about an hour after we fire our deorbit engines to start that burn to re-enter.
Now, that's all very technical, but just to put it in layman's terms, you're essentially in a box with parachutes attached to it, and you're just going to fall through the sky, right? I mean, this is utterly terrifying to me. Like, are you worried about, are you going to, presumably, do you, like, throw up when you're in there?
Yeah, great question. I don't think we'll have to worry about too much of that while we're re-entering. I think what we're more concerned about from the throw-up standpoint is once we are in the water for a little while. One effect of being in space, especially for us now being in space by the time we come back, likely a couple months, is you're very conditioned to microgravity and you're not so conditioned to gravity. And then your vestibular system, your inner ears play tricks with you. So it's a lot like, as you can imagine, even if you decided to go fishing, deep sea fishing one day, and you've lived on Earth your whole life and you've gone out fishing and people get seasick, we're going to do it from space and end up in the water. So there's a pretty good likelihood that we may see breakfast twice on that particular day.
Now, I really want to ask you, when you left Earth, it's such a difficult time. Here, there is so much division, not just in America, across the whole world. The entire planet feels divided. So many countries feel divided. When you look back at planet Earth, what do you see and what do you feel? And do you have any words of encouragement for us humble Earthlings who are here right now?
I think we're trying to be humble space folks as well up here. I think that Doug referred to it a little bit earlier when he talked about the time we spent out in California, building a partnership and a relationship with the team of SpaceX engineers that was going to build the spacecraft that our lives were going to depend on all the way into orbit and to bring us home safely. We really recognize on board the International Space Station the value of working together, creating some sort of common understanding and cooperation. We have cosmonaut crewmates that we work with on a routine basis. During the spacewalk that we'll perform later this week, we'll actually have a cosmonaut helping us get suited up and head out the door, making sure everything is closed up for us. And so I think that's the message that we would like to share, with all the folks who are still back on Earth, is that, our success depends on cooperation and understanding and respect for the other folks that are doing their jobs to help us come back safely or execute a spacewalk safely. And that's what it's going to take to get through these challenging times back on Earth, whether it's the pandemic or some of the other strife that's going on. That understanding and that cooperation and that need and effort that goes into what's required to just work together to pull off things successfully is what we're going to have to do back on Earth as well. And hopefully we can just be an example of that, and one that with commercial partners or with our cosmonaut friends is a great demonstration for folks around the world.
Well, that's a lovely message. Thank you so much. We wish you the very, very best, hoping for a safe return to Earth. Thank you so much, Bob and Doug, NASA and SpaceX, for taking the time to talk to us today. We really, really appreciate it. Stay safe up there, fellas. We'll be right back with more of the Late Late Show right after this.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That